Hi guys, welcome back. Tonight what I'm quickly going to talk about is a little bit about Spanish style leaders for nymphing in the river. Now, the main things that you need to keep in mind when it comes down to any kind of nymphing in running water really is it's all based around three things: quality of drift, contact to the fly, and bite detection. Those are the three golden rules really when it comes down to good nymph fishing. And these sort of Spanish style leaders cover all three of those points really, really well. Now, what is a Spanish style nymphing leader? Typically, a Spanish style leader is a relatively thin diameter leader, and it's typically parallel in design. It hasn't really got any taper in it. So you're not relying on the taper of the leader to transfer energy and to turn the fly over. You're relying in a big way on the weight of the fly to propel itself towards the target. Now, I'm not going to get into the conversation about whether it's fly fishing or not. Obviously, I fish a lot of competitions under FIPS-MOOSH rules, and we have rules in place that are basically put in there to ensure that we're still fly fishing. Now, one of those rules is that our leaders cannot be more than 2 times the length of the rod. So my rod is 10 foot 8 inches in length. Let's call it 11 foot for argument's sake. That means my overall leader from fly to end of fly line cannot be more than 22 foot in length. If you're a pleasure angler, you can make it as long as you like. Personally, even when I'm pleasure fishing, I stick to the 2 times rod length rule. The reason being, I don't like to handle thin monofilament in my hand when I'm nymph fishing. I'd much prefer to have fly line in my fingers. Now, you can do it with a normal style fly line. The only problem with the normal style fly line is that it's relatively thick and it's relatively heavy. That fly line then is weight basically between you and the nymph. And any weight between you and the nymph is robbing you of contact, it's interfering with your drift. So it's taking away 2 of the main points of why you would want a thin Spanish style nymphing leader. So, for me, the best solution to that, the best fly line to use, is one of the thin European nymphing leaders, nymphing fly lines, which are typically either a braid or a monocore that's coated with PVC or polyurethane to make it a very, very thin, lightweight fly line. If you're not sure or you don't believe me that it has a big impact in how well your fly drifts, this is how you do it. It's how you test the theory. Rig your rod up, put a normal weight forward fly line through it, put a tapered leader on, and a lightweight nymph, let's say a 2mm beaded nymph, throw it out, hold the rod tip up. What you'll see is a big sag between the tip of the rod and the nymph. Sag basically means drag. When that line is sagging, it's pulling your nymph. Do the same thing with a European nymphing line with a thin parallel Spanish style leader, same weight bead, throw it out there, hold the rod up, and you will see a much more direct contact to the nymph. Contact means control, means better take detection, means better ability to manipulate the nymph in the drift if you want to induce it. So all good things when it comes to nymph fishing. Now, onto the leader itself. So, a typical Spanish style leader, like I mentioned, is either parallel or with a very, very slight taper between the sections. This particular one is in 3 sections. So the main leader itself is this single coloured, level coloured nylon. Now, you can make that a single colour, bi-colour, or even tricolour. Whatever takes your fancy, as long as you can see it. It needs to be something that you can see. In the middle of the leader, and this is a 3-section leader, the Spanish guys will typically use a clear section, or in some cases, and I personally prefer, a different colour of line for the middle section. So what I've got is a yellow butt section, and in this case, I've got a white midsection. That's about 50 centimetres long. On the front of that, I have another section of coloured line. In this case, it's about 45, and this is a tri-coloured line. This is yellow, black and red. So overall, my leader from the back end, the end that attaches to the line, to the fly line, I have 018 in solid yellow colour. I then have 018 in white, and then I have 018 in tricolour, yellow, black, red. So why do you need those three different colours of line? The reason is it gives you versatility when you're fishing. When you get to that section of water, and bear in mind again, I'm a comp angler, so a lot of the time I'm faced with a section of water that I have to fish as efficiently as possible. But this still holds true when you're a pleasure angler, because you want to be efficient and catch as many fish as you can. So whenever you get to a section of water to nymph fish, you have to make a choice. The choice you have to make is, how long a tippet do I attach to the end of my indicator section? If you've got deep water, you might want to make that tippet section 70, 75 centimetres long. If you've got shallow water, you might only want to make it 40 centimetres long. Because the further that nymph is away from the colour, the greater chance you have of having a take that you don't detect very well. So it's always an advantage having that nymph within reason, as close as practically possible to your colour. So the reason these Spanish leaders work so well is that what you can do is you can rig up your tippet length for, let's say, the average depth of your beat. So let's, for argument's sake, say I've got it set at 65 centimetres in this case. I fish through the water, which is applicable for the 65 centimetre drop. Let's say it's the first 2/3 of my beat. But then I hit deeper water, and I need to really get that nymph down deep. So if I was using an old style traditional tapered leader, which is quite thick and heavy, my only real choice would be to either extend the tippet length, so I've got to re-rig, I've got to undo it, tie a longer length of tippet on. If I've got two flies on, I might have to re-rig the second one to get them flies down deeper. Or the other option, which is the less desirable option, is to let some of that thick, heavy tapered leader sink into the water. But because it's thick, it's going to catch the current to a large degree. So the current's going to grab it, it's going to rob me of contact. I'm not going to be in good control of my nymphs. Not a good idea. So the trick with these Spanish leaders is that you can go through your shallow water, you hit the deeper stuff, and all you do is allow that first coloured section to actually descend through the water column. And then you can indicate off your middle section, which is still coloured, and you can see it. If this middle section is clear, which some guys do prefer, I'll be honest, what you do is you use the colour differentiation between your end section and your second section to indicate the take. If it's really deep, you can let the whole of the second section go in, and you indicate off the colour of the butt section. So it's giving me an additional 100 centimetres of drop. And in reality, 100 centimetres of additional tippet material if I want to let it drop down into deep water. So that's the advantage of it. But there is a big disadvantage. Fish will lie in very, very, very shallow water a lot of the time. If you get in that shallow water, you still have to re-rig. Because with one of these leaders, and let's say we're at 65 centimetres to the nymph, I get in shallow water, my two options are this. Number one, I cut the tippet down because I want that nymph as close as practically possible to the colour to indicate it. And that's exacerbated in very, very shallow water because fish in shallow water have a tendency not to go a long way to take a nymph. They tend to be quite quick reactionary takes in shallow water, and they're very, very hard to hit at times. So, option one is to shorten that tippet length. Option two, which you see touted a lot, is to extend your arm and hold the indicator section much higher and carry the nymph through the shallow water. Now, you can do that. The downside to it is your coloured indicator section is a long way away from the nymph in a scenario where the takes are very, very typically very, very fast and hard to hit. So it's not a good thing from a take detection standpoint. So The easy way around that, and if any of you've seen my articles I did in Fly Fishing and Fly Tying a while ago, I mentioned this. What I will do is if I get in shallow water, is I'll use coloured wax, put a small mark on the tippet immediately above the nymph, sometimes only down to 20 centimetres away. If anything touches that nymph, that coloured wax when it moves gives me a very, very quick indication of a take, and I can set the hook and get the fish. Now, that wax is neutral, it doesn't float, it doesn't sink. So under the rules in FIPS, we are allowed to currently use that. So that gives me the ability to use this leader, which is very, very good and very, very versatile, to even better effect in shallow water. Now, if I want to get rid of that wax mark, if I get into deeper water, I can wipe it off very, very quickly with one of these supermarket cleaning pads. You just wet it, pull it through once, and that's the wax gone, and then I can fish again very effectively in deeper water. But one of my personal, if you like, tricks that I use a lot of the time is I leave that wax mark on even when I'm in deeper water. And I do it for one main reason. When I throw that nymph in sometimes, quite a lot of the time you'll get an impact take. So when that fly hits the water, it starts to sink. Quite often a fish will come from quite deep and hit that fly. If I leave that wax mark on, it still gives me a visual point of reference. So what I do is when I throw the fly in, I look at the colour that's the furthest away from me, i.e. the wax mark. I watch that one until I can no longer see it, and then I switch back to my first coloured indicator section. And if I'm letting that nymph go really deep, I switch back to the second one, or if it's going even deeper, I switch back to the third one. So it's all about indication. Now, the thing that you need to remember with these leaders, the thinner the leader, the better it drifts, the better take detection you have, and the better contact you have with the nymph. So thinner is best. The downside to that is thin leaders are harder to manage. They're harder to be accurate with, they require more practice, and to be honest, you need the right equipment. A lot of the modern rods now that are coming out have been specifically designed for this kind of nymph fishing. They've typically got much softer tips, but they still have a strong enough butt section if you get hold of a big fish, because even though we're fishing very light and very delicately, we still catch a lot of big fish doing this. Probably more so, because big fish tend to be more educated. You need to get a better drift to catch them. So you need the right tool for the right job. I never make these things a sales pitch, but keep your eye out towards the end of the year. There's some new rods coming out that I've just designed for Hardy, which are 100% perfect for this style of fishing. In particular, the 10-foot, 8-inch 0 through 2 weight. That really is my go-to nymphing rod. That's the rod I've been using for the last 18 months. So that's really it on Spanish style leaders and how I personally fish them. Hope it works out for you. Give it a go. Thanks a lot, guys.